Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 299, Storytelling Crimes, Part 2. Oh, do not let this go on too long. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Now, this is a term if you're a small business owner and you have watched anything in Facebook or YouTube, you've probably seen 10X all over the place.
I don't think I'm aware of this.
Well, because you're not being targeted with 10X because you're not a small business owner.
Okay.
Because of my likes and interests, I get targeted with different ads than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And 10Xing is everywhere because it's about 10X in your business, 10X in your life, 10X this, 10X that. Everything's 10X for business owners. Like you want to 10X your profit, right? Because you're a company trying to make money.
Only 10X.
Well, that's your next step is a 10X. It's easier. And here's the quick idea, right? Is if you make something if you shoot your goal 10 times higher than what you need, getting what you need is easier. Because if you fall short, you can still get past your goal. So you're always trying to shoot to go 10 times where you are.
Super quick aside. Guys, dream big. Think super big. That's all I'm going to say about. No, I'm going to say a little more. I'm not going to go on for 10 minutes. So really think bigger. Think bigger than you're thinking now. Like if you have a goal, really 10X that goal.
Yes.
Like really do it. Like think about I want to write a short story. No, write a long story. Write a
long
book.
story and cut crap out.
And then if you end up writing a really longer than the short story that was originally the goal, great. Look what you just did. You wrote this great friggin' story. Think bigger. That's all I'm going to say. Think bigger. All right, keep going.
We'll do an episode of that at some point. Because
let's do that next one.
We'll do that on the next one.
Okay.
10Xing the cast is one of those areas where I'm going to argue against that.
Against 10Xing the cast.
Against 10Xing. You don't want to do it with the cast.
So cast of the story.
Exactly.
Okay.
So your character cast sometimes gets too ambitious.
Examples?
Examples. Okay. Let's think about any movie where you have 500 subplots and you have no idea what's going on. And maybe it's even kind of interesting and you kind of wish you knew what was going on. That's
not an example. That is Dune is an example.
Dune. There's lots of characters.
What movie? You said it 3 times, but
Dune.
I didn't catch it. Okay, fair.
Dune. You have 10,000 characters and they all have their own motives and beliefs and structures, which is great. Great.
For a book.
Or like for the long several seasons of Game of Thrones, it's great until the end when they just forget the first 7 seasons. But whatever.
And start kidnapping characters.
And plots and stuff until they make all of these mistakes. And then I defend them. Yes, because we could tear up Game of Thrones, but that's just too easy. But avoid having too large, because the problem is stories can become convoluted. And when the story's in your head, it's easy to see how the pieces are coming together. But for people are designed to create and intake stories. But if you give them too much information at once, they're not going to retain enough of it to be able to piece it together. So the thing is, and a lot of the best stories have very small cast, especially if they're character stories, because it allows you to get in the characters, and the thing is, because Game of Thrones gets popular and there's all these different plots going on, then someone goes, that's great. Let's do that in this movie or this short 1 season thing. Great example, Stranger Things. First season.
Better example.
Amazing, right?
Better example. Castaway, 1 person
for being good. Yes. Stranger Things, the first season was really good. I've not seen the 3rd season because the 2nd season lost me.
Really?
Why did the 2nd season lose me? It was okay.
I don't know. Why?
I watched it to the end, but I lost interest because the problem is, what was the core mechanic that worked in the first season? It was these 4 kids. Sure, you have the crazy mom. 4 kids and a crazy mom and a cop are pretty much the cast with the villain.
Sister and a brother.
No, they weren't really in it.
Yeah,
but essentially, you had this. Most of the time was spent on the 4 boys.
Yes.
who are most of the time together with the girl.
Or 3 boys and a girl.
But then you start adding in more characters.
Because Will was kidnapped for most of the first season.
Well, the girl kind of replaces Will.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So 3 boys and a girl.
3 boys and a girl. So that's a fair point. But in the next season, Will doesn't go away. He kind of becomes 2 characters because sometimes he's the bad guy and Will. Mm-hmm. And then you start adding in the new girl and her brother who come to town, and now they need character arcs and stories. And you start adding in more people who need character arcs and character stories, or it'll be ham-fisted in there. So your choice is you either ham-fist stuff in there, or you start creating all of these different plots to make things work. And it becomes confusing, and you start to lose interest in any one thing because you're doing too much.
I got to tell you, this
and
sounds
if you do
to
it
me,
well, you can beat me. I'm not saying I can't be wrong here.
This sounds to me like this sounds to me like you having an issue with this specific story, as opposed to my perspective on that is you start small based on budget, story, and availability, and you create the small story where you have these 4 characters, as you pointed out in season 1. And the second is world building. That's what the show is about. The second you're expanding the universe, you start saying, okay, you now know who these 4 people are, and let's make the cast bigger. I don't think that's a good example of 10xing the cast. I think that's an example of
From what I heard, when you get to season 3, you kind of do, because now you start adding in even more characters. And season 2, I watched the completion, so it's not a great example. You're right. Because I still watched the completion. I still enjoyed it, but I started to lose interest, like when they go to Chicago and adding people there and then kidnap that entire plot and throw it away.
I think you need to give me a different example of 10xing the cast, because I think this is.
But I'm saying is
because I could argue this one all day.
But you're wrong, because the problem is
you don't think it's appropriate to call that expanding the universe and building the world.
You can, but the problem is when you try and involve all of the same characters at the same time. The thing is, you have to let some characters go away. He leaves town. This person moves on. When you add them all to the ensemble cast, which is what the show is. It's an ensemble cast. When you make the ensemble cast too large, you have too many plots going on to where you start to, it's kind of like you try and make that book that's good for everyone. So you want to have a little bit of everything in there for everyone. And the problem is the larger it gets, maybe not season 2, but once you get to season 3, you start to get to there's a point at which you will cross to where you start losing more people than you gain, because it's just there's not enough meat for any one person to consume to eat. And that's the danger. And the problem is it's not a sign. You can't have a checklist and go, this is the correct number of characters. I watched all of season 2, so Michael in a way is correct by saying I'm wrong, because I finished it and I enjoyed it.
Will you repeat that, please?
In a way, Michael was wrong.
I just want to hear you say, in a way, Michael was right and I was wrong.
and you were in this one instance, because I finished.
It's the only instance.
It's the only one I could think of.
Fair enough.
Because this is where Michael, or this is where, I'm not sure where that point is, but by the time you get to season 3, I don't even want to start, because it became too much work to keep up with the characters. By the end of 3, I just didn't want to put the work in for season 3. So I just I'm done.
So here's what I'm going to say about this bullet point: 10xing the cast. I agree with Jeff in the point of.
He doesn't like my example, but
I don't like your example. I was just going to get to that. I do agree with you.
So you liked Dune? You thought Dune was a great movie?
I thought Dune was a great book, and I enjoyed
the movie.
I know. I enjoyed the movie.
That was my first example. So you're saying I'm wrong. You have to say Dune is the best movie ever.
Would you stop for a second? Let me finish my sentence. You're interrupting everything I say.
No, I'm not.
I admittedly, I have not watched the old Dune in probably 20 years. I'd have to watch it again from an adult perspective, knowing the book better than I did when I was younger, to really assess it. Is it, say that again?
When you know the story, it's better. Yeah.
It's better. Well, it's better because it's easier to understand the movie, or the movie is worse because you have to read the book to know.
The movie is bad because if you don't know the story, it makes no sense. But if you know the story and watch the movie, it's very enjoyable. The movie becomes enjoyable.
Which makes it not good.
Yeah. As a movie.
Okay. So we can call Dune, we can agree on Dune the movie 10xing the cast.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you on Stranger Things, because I think Stranger Things did a really good job expanding its universe in season 2. And I think that's what they were doing. They're like, listen, this world is bigger than you realize. Good? I loved season 3.
Okay.
But that's because I was so on board in season 2, you know, and I just followed it along. I think if you're giving somebody a story and the characters and everything, little bit at a time, I think that's the way to do it. I agree that you should not go, let's drop 1,000 characters. Like, when I watched Game of Thrones, the first like 3-4 episodes, I was fucking lost. I was like, this is great. But was it Targaryen? I mean, now it's easy. Now it's like,
they needed to be much more patient with their storytelling, and that was ultimately the problem with the show.
The irony is that they didn't have to, because once you get far enough in, you're like, I know who everybody is, and that's just because everyone is so distinct. But if it wasn't,
you have the time to get there, yeah.
If it wasn't for the fact that the characters and the actors, everybody did such a good job. If they had not done such a good job and distinguished themselves as individuals so well, it might have been a lot harder to follow that tale. But
let's be honest, if you can get Sean Bean to die in your flick, it'll be good. I think that's a rule.
Is that kind of a rule?
I think this is a storytelling. I could be wrong, but yeah. I
love Sean Bean. Who doesn't?
And Sean Bean dying, let's be honest.
I don't love Sean Bean dying. I like Sean Bean living.
No, he's much better.
Sorry, man.
Dying.
Like him living.
No, actually, I do.
All right. Are we ready to be done with 10xing the cast?
Yeah, we're done.
All right. You have one more bullet point here, but this is my time to interject and create another bullet point. And my creative bullet point is quite poignant in that it's called hijacking the story.
Let me step in there for a second. Go ahead.
Hijacking the story or hijacking the character. I'm also going to call this hamstringing the story or hamstringing the character. These are two different points. I'm going to lump them into the same bullet point, though. So hijacking the story, hijacking the character is this. This is when you're writing a movie, writing a story, writing a book, and you've created a character. You've defined the concepts and the things that this character is committed to. Now, prior to writing a story, at least for me, I usually have an idea of what I want to occur. Sometimes I have scenes, like I have like specific scenes. I was like, oh my God, this scene is so good. And I know the tale that this scene is going to fit into. And I start at the beginning and try to write that tale. And sometimes the character, I've defined the character as per usually that scene. And I start writing the tale and I realize that while it fit as that scene, having a beginning and a definition of what that character is, and then I write the story at a chronological starting point and begin to run through that character's story, he gets to the timeline point of where that scene should occur, and that scene can't occur based on the things that character has done and established so far in the story. That is the character hijacking the story on me. I can't contradict that character at that point. I've established that for the reader, and that'd be unfair because now I'm going to create something that is ham-fisting something that I wanted to occur, the scene that I thought of initially,
and didn't develop it.
And I can't squeeze that in because the character has established himself as a thing. It's like, here is a rock. I've created a rock, and I've shown the viewer, the reader, a rock. And now I want that rock to be a bucket of water. I realize it's a weird analogy, but I'm doing that on purpose. I'm doing that on purpose. The rock is immovable and inflexible. And your characters should be, I'm not saying all characters should be predictable, but any given character should be 100% predictable if you know everything about the character. And that's the thing. The reader does not know everything about the character. You as the writer might. And that's what's great about villains. The reader, the hero, never knows everything. Never knows everything about the villain, which makes the villain unpredictable.
Unless they're Mary Sue.
And I love that, unless they're Mary Sue. So if you start to run into that, you create the character, and then all of a sudden you really want to put something in there, but you're like, you know what? This is contradictory to what I've established for the character so far. That's you trying to hijack the character or the story. If the character you've established so far is changing what you'd originally intended for a plot, that's the character hijacking the story on you. And you know what? That's okay. As long as, you're okay with it and you can make still an engaging story out of it. I know that I can. And guess what? I believe and I have faith that you can too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't really argue with that one at all. I agree. And yeah.
You have nothing to add? Holy crap.
Nothing to add. No, I think you covered it very well.
All right. Wow. I'm going to take a gold star for this one.
I just don't want to interrupt and be like hijacking it. So
no, go for it, dude.
No, this is not
the good part. No, you can do it.
We're just saying hijacking's bad. I'm not going to do it.
All right. No, it's bad. Don't do it. Your last point.
It's kind of been led into avoiding conflict. You don't see this a lot in things that are produced for television or movies.
Last bullet point is avoiding conflict. I just wanted to be definitive that you're changing to the next bullet point.
Yeah. This isn't something you see a lot in movies, and there are some occasionally that slip through that bore you to death. But even in those French movies that people always complain about, which is because they misunderstand them, that are two people talking at a bar for like 90 minutes.
I love French movies. Well, who complains about these?
People who don't understand them. And the one that comes to mind is from an Irish author, of course, Waiting for Godot.
No, I'm sorry. You said Waiting for Godot, but my brain went Waiting for Guffman.
Now, and the reason he comes up is the author Samuel Beckett was big. The longer he was alive, the smaller his sets got, the less people who were involved in the stories. I think there's like one story he wrote that was like literally like a light would shrink around one character throughout.
You need to help me for a second and tell me about Waiting for Godot, because I don't think I'm familiar with it.
Waiting for Godot is two people waiting for God. They're sitting on a bench, and that's the movie. Or it's actually a play. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, is it a movie?
They're waiting for Godot, a metaphor, I think, for God. And but they're just sitting on a bench waiting and talking, and that's it.
Okay,
that's the story, and it's brilliant. But the thing is, people conflate conflict with fighting. The thing is, conflict to have a story, you need a couple things. You need characters or a character. You need some type of conflict and then resolution. All your subplots will have it. All of your main story arcs will have it. They might not be conflict per se. It might just be overcoming yourself. It might be overcoming a way to think.
It could still be conflict, but yeah.
Exactly. My point being, it doesn't have to be like people even arguing. You know, and conflict is not arguing. It's not fighting. It's a problem that you're resolving.
Or I see conflict as I have a perspective, you have a perspective, and they're not the same. Or I have a perspective and I have another perspective on the same subject, and they are not the same. Yeah.
But see, to me, that's all solving a problem, right? Is there are too many possibilities, and you have to whittle it down to one. And there are many different ways to get to it. But the idea is sometimes I see this more in novice storytellers. They might even have a venture where you're running through the woods pointlessly. You know, there's no and this is where a Mary Sue character causes this by accident, where there's no chance they're going to fail. So there's no real conflict that you need a resolution to. You're playing those old games where you're following a rail. They're kind of cool. The first time, maybe. The thing is, they make very bad stories because you know that no matter what you do, you're just going to go the same direction every time. And sure, maybe here or there something will jump out and go boo, and you have to shoot it with your plastic gun because it's a video game. But it does not make for compelling entertainment. And there's a reason why those games don't do very well. And even today, when they create them, they try and add a few more layers in. So you feel like you have what they call
agency.
Like most modern adventure role-play games where you feel like you're making choices throughout the narrative. But if you play it through and answered the opposite, nothing would really change in the story. That's just making you feel like there's agency. But an illusion works, and storytelling's illusionary sometimes. So, the thing is, always make sure that there's some kind of conflict, something for the characters to actually get through, even if it's very subtle. Whether it's a side plot, whether it is a long story narrative or a multi-story arc, At each level, there needs to be conflicts that are being resolved along the way, even minute. And sometimes only one person is needed for a conflict, or two rattlesnakes and a dog in a vicious match. That's not really. But I think that one's pretty simple. I don't think there's really a lot to it. But I do have one final one, which is don't make your story go too long, sort of like this episode, which is why it's 2 parts. It's really one episode recorded, but it's 2 for people who are listening.
Welcome to the end of episode 2.
299.
299. Yeah, the avoiding conflict. I guess my 2 cents on that is, when you say avoiding conflict, I immediately think of real life people, because people have a natural tendency to want to avoid conflict. Yeah. I kind of have an opposite. That was very clever. I kind of have an opposite approach to it. I tend to charge into conflict. And I'm okay with the contradiction of comfort. Like if you're in a scenario and you start noticing, like you got 3-4 people in the room and something has occurred that's clearly contradictory to the comfort of the room. Like somebody has said or done a given thing and everyone is like, that's a faux pas, that's wrong, or what the heck, or blah, blah, blah. I like pointing it out. Like I'm okay. And I'm also comfortable with being in conflict, because there is potential there. And I think that potential is worth exploring. And in a story, I think that that's important, because conflict is where you have interest. Like if you just have everything go through a story and it's just la-di-da-di-da, everything's happy and there's no conflict, that's boring.
Yeah, I could put a narrative down of me getting through a day where nothing goes wrong, where there's no problems, right? Maybe I play a few video games or whatever. I could tell it would not be engaging because nothing would really happen.
I know, but let's even make that bigger. Let's say you have the adventuring hero and he goes through a bunch of adventures and he comes across a band of, orcs and, swiftly and easily destroys them, and then comes across a puzzle that he needs to solve and swiftly and easily solves it, and then comes across a big beast and swiftly and easily kills it. While those are adversarial things that are popping up in the story, I wouldn't call any of that conflict. No, conflict is when there's difficulty.
You don't feel at risk.
Exactly.
And it's not conflict even for the characters, because you might even, like he says, you might have conflicts for the characters to overcome to show how powerful the character is. But if there's never any
danger,
any feeling for the readers or the viewers to think that there's actually a risk here.
That's a problem I had with Captain Marvel.
And and Mary Sue is a great, easy way to get there. So in a way, all these are kind of interconnected, because storytelling is really
your character can still be overpowered and badass, but display it in a way that still makes it look like they had to try, and there was still there's still a level of danger involved in there.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in Predator is a perfect example of this.
I disagree, because I think he got very lucky.
But he was a badass. But
he was a badass.
It took him luck. Really, it was luck. It was his skill too. It was his skill and a little bit of luck to overcome the monster.
So that's not a good example of a lack of conflict. That's an example of good conflict.
No, that's what I'm saying is a good example of conflict with a badass was Predator.
Yes, but what I'm actually saying is, if you have a character like a Superman or a Wolverine or a Rowan. Rowan, is that the D&D big bad guy who can kill everything basically?
There is a character I think called Rowan who can do that. Drizzt. Yeah. I mean, there are several.
Drizzt. No, that's the one I'm thinking of. Drizzt. Yeah. So characters that are like super overpowered, you can still make their story interesting, even if they walk into a room full of horrible guys, and you, the writer, the storyteller, know that, look, he can wipe the floor with these dudes. You don't have to display it in a way that it's boring for the reader. You can still build conflict. You can still build worry, risk, and
maybe the risk is, when is he going to open his can?
Or maybe you know that he's super badass, but maybe he doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another way.
Maybe he does not realize his own potential. And he's thus genuinely afraid. There's a lot of dudes in this room. I don't know if I can
or imagine this,
walk out of here.
The Clark Kent character who's super strong, right? A great story, and Smallville should have done this, but they didn't. Even though I really enjoyed Smallville.
I loved Smallville.
Imagine he punches someone and like rips their heart out or something by accident.
Kano.
Because he could. But think of him overcoming that. So sometimes maybe even after the display, there's
overcoming that he actually did it.
Yeah, exactly. Like having to deal with the consequences of. I was trying to pat the guy on the back and I ripped out a spinal column. Whoops. But for a Clark Kent character, that would cause issues. But could very well be a way that he would have to learn his superpowers would be. Whoops! I accidentally ripped someone in half today.
On a side note, go to Redbox and watch Brightburn. So good.
Okay, I've never heard of it, but I'll check it out.
Brightburn is what if Clark Kent was sociopathic? What if Clark Kent was a psycho?
Oh, like the boys. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very good.
It's good. So it's worth watching.
So now we're going to go in for the one world building task for the last 2 episodes. And the one world building task is I'm going to put in a link to some of those YouTube channels. I've been watching a lot of those lately, which has been making me think about this stuff. Just watch all of their videos, all of them, for all 3 channels I'll put up there.
All of them.
All of the years, probably years these people have up there. So just years worth of videos.
My task is go watch Copycat.
On top of all of the videos.
On top of all the videos. Now, this is the end of 299.
This is the end of 299.
Next episode is a media episode. I insist.
For 300?
300.
Okay.
Now, we could watch the 300 and be silly. But my intention, and I'm not kidding, I've been shopping and I haven't found it yet. And I'm not willing to spend the $20 it would cost me to buy it off of Amazon. I've been trying to find Reign of Fire. I'm gonna reach out to friends and try to find anybody who might have a copy of Reign of Fire. I would like us to sit down and watch Reign of Fire and talk about it.
Okay. All right.
So if next episode is not about Reign of Fire, guys, I failed.
Yes. We'll just go back and cut this out. But it'll be downloaded on thousands of computers at that point.
Nah, leave it in.
Right. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.